Vadim, thank you for taking the time to speak with me. One of the things that I really love about instruments is the stories that are associated with them. And on this stage last night, we performed together the Tchaikovsky Souvenir de Florence. And this violin has a very kind of special history with that work. Can you tell us a little bit about this violin and about that story?
Sure. Well, it's an instrument that I've been playing on for 25 years now, since 1997. It's a Stradivari that was built in 1690, and it belonged to none other than Leopold Auer. Besides being a great violinist on his own right, he is basically responsible for what we knew as Russian violin school. He, in a way, set the cornerstone by only producing the likes of Jascha Heifetz, Nathan Milstein, Misha Ellman, Frem Cymbalist, and
almost all the greatest violinists.
Almost of all times, you could say. Right. That he brought violin to its ultimate greatness in a way. And going back to yesterday, we in a way closed a historical circle because the Souvenir de Florence of Tchaikovsky, the second version, once it was rewritten and premiered in 1892, it was actually premiered by Leopold Auer, and for all we know, it was with this instrument.
That's just so incredible. Just to think of who might have heard this instrument, who has held this instrument, who's tried this instrument. Maybe if Mr. Auer left the room, maybe a young Jascha Heifetz picked it up and scratched a few notes out.
Very possible. To think that Tchaikovsky and Glazunov and all the composers at the time, they heard this violin regularly in Auer's hands. And it's interesting that both Tchaikovsky and Glazunov wrote their concerti for Auer, and they had a very different story. Tchaikovsky being rejected on this very violin, Glazunov premiered. But it's interesting, they both start on the solo part of both concertos starts on the same string, on the same note. And I'm not about to accuse Glazunov of plagiarism, not at all. I think they were inspired in a way by the attributes of the violin. It has a very sonorous and deep, low voice, and down on the bass string, our bass string. Of course, for you it's a little funny. But they both start on this note, and both use the G string a lot in their concertos.
So is that your favorite note on this violin?
Of course it is.
Tell me about how you came to play this violin.
Well, it started back in mid-90s when I was a student at Juilliard, when we were students at Juilliard. Yeah. I was at the beginning of my concert career, and I had a beautiful instrument lent to me by the American Israel Cultural Foundation through Isaac Stern's recommendation. It was a Pietro Guarneri of Mantua, absolutely gorgeous fiddle that was quite severely damaged and beautifully restored by René Morel. We're talking in 1970s, 1980s. But I was struggling with it in terms of projection and playing with orchestras, besides being young and inexperienced and nervous and whatnot. This was an added challenge. So Ms. DeLay called the STRAD Society.
Dorothy DeLay.
Yes, my
teacher at the time.
And said there is this young kid who kind of shows promise, and he needs a fiddle that will support the promise.
Yeah.
And they called me shortly after we were coming with my wife, already at the time my wife, Angela, to play a debut at Arvinia, to play a recital. And they said that while they don't have any instrument available for long-term lending, the Bani & Fushi, the parent company of Stradivari Society, rare violin dealership, they had, and they always do, they had an array of instruments on sale, and they would be willing to lend me that instrument for a day or two to play that recital. So I remember distinctly I chose Wieniawski's STRAD.
Huh.
I played a recital on that, and we had a very nice meeting, but there was nothing available, so that's where we left it. And then some month after that, maybe half a year, we came back from a concert trip, and on our message machine, you might remember those with little cassette tapes. You had to press play and rewind and forward. There was a message, Vadim, this is Stradivari Society, we have an instrument for you. Would you like, if you would like to, you can come and get it. I think I was hearing the end of that message already by the elevator.
Yeah, right, you're just running.
And I'll never forget the moment when this Suzanne Fouché, at the time the director of the society, she came out with a violin.
Mystery violin.
You quite quickly you realize it's a Stradivari.
Yeah.
And I take it. I don't even play it yet. And you know, sometimes you have this feeling that someone is watching you from behind. It's something you can't help. And on instinct, I turned around, and there was a huge portrait of Auer staring at me.
Oh. Wow.
I wouldn't make this up. It's still on the wall at Vadim Gluzman.
Yeah.
Exactly the same place.
Was he listening to you like this?
I had the feeling that yes. I have a feeling he still does.
Yeah. So was it love at first sound?
No.
No.
I mean, this was immediately, clearly a different level of instrument from what I was playing.
Sure.
And this is not to speak ill of the Pietro Guarneri. It was a beautiful fiddle, but this is just an absolutely different being, different beast. But I realized immediately I will have to learn. I will have to learn how to play it. I will have to learn how to connect the idea of sound that I have in my ear to the physical reality. It took years.
Yeah.
And as I was learning, I dare say, so she was learning.
Yeah.
And by now, I think it's fair to say that we are both unrecognizable to Vadim circa 1997 or Auer circa 1997.
Yeah, you've built a partnership.
We have, for sure.
Strong relationship, yeah. With a much older lady.
Absolutely. So, my wife says that this is the only other woman she will tolerate.
Could you tell me a little bit about this very special stick that you're holding?
Yes, this is it's a bow made by Dominique Peccatte as far as we understand, in late or second half of the 19th century. It could be between the 1860s and 1880s. And Peccatte is thought of as, well, Stradivari of the bow making. Somehow violin making was always gravitating to Italy and bow making to France. And this bow also has a special history as far as who were the owners. We were always fascinated by who has touched it.
Right.
And this bow belonged to Ysaye first, and then to Henryk Szeryng.
It's just incredible.
It's an amazing thought, especially when it comes to repertoire that is active in any violinist's almost daily life, such as Franck Sonata or Chasson's poem or Chasson Concerto for violin, piano, and string quartet. To think that Ysaye very likely premiered it with this bow.
Wow.
That he had played on this bow, and then Henryk Szeryng making his great recordings of Beethoven, Brahms concertos, Bach's solo sonatas and partitas, and it played it.
It's just,
it's amazing.
It is amazing. I wonder if there's even something in the way that it handles or speaks or responds. Do you hear any of that in the recordings?
I do hear
something.
Szeryng in it.
Yeah.
There is an incredible smoothness that it penetrates the string very deeply, but there is never sharpness unpleasant sharpness to the sound, and that is something that is very typical for Szeryng. utmost sophistication of sound.
Yeah.
It never had a rough edge on it. It was always very cultivated. And I'm not saying, of course, that that's why, but certainly it was a very good partner for his style of playing.
Yeah. Well, this is an embarrassment of riches.
I do agree. I realize very, very well that I am spoiled.
That's wonderful. So I have to ask you. So you're busy touring the world, playing concertos with all these orchestras and recitals everywhere. And why are you running a festival?
So we could see each other at least once in a couple of years. No, seriously, this is not even a joke. Being a soloist is a kind of lonely existence. Yes, you meet people, you are constantly working with musicians, but it's not always the people you want to see. And the idea was always from the get-go to gather friends. And well, we're lucky to have friends who are great musicians. And to spend the week together, rehearse, eat, drink, perform, connect with the audience. I don't know, I just can't be happier than during this week.
It's been such a wonderful week, and now I need to go on a diet.
Well, that's the point. And since this is really not your first time, you could have gone on a diet before.
That's right.
Then to compensate your older colleague Rad, who is also regular, he goes on a diet before coming to the show.
Does he really?
It is true.
He's smart. I need to learn from him. Can we hear a few notes on this instrument?
Sure. I can show you something interesting. I have here at least 2 of my former SOUNDPOSTs. I just keep them as little souvenirs. In every language besides English, SOUNDPOST is called a soul. So these are kind of little parts of this violin's historic soul. I keep them with me. And it goes to sleep for the day.